Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Adam Eisen Show. We're on episode 6 of the second season after a wild week 2 of NFL action. We're going to be covering all that and much more in this episode, so let's go ahead, jump into it for today with the San Francisco 49ers, the National Football League, and the current QB situation they are dealing with. If you all didn't see it this past weekend, Trey Lance suffered an absolutely gruesome injury to his ankle. He broke his ankle, and I wish him the most speedy recovery process. I hope it goes well. I hope the surgery goes well, and he is now out for this year, and that officially brings back Jimmy Garoppolo, porn star Jimmy G. And as we know, this locker room absolutely loves Jimmy G. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, all these guys, all they have had to say is high things about Jimmy G. And he was extremely hard to move off of this offseason. And I think, depending on the way this season goes, it could be a hard job for Trey Lance to win back. If we recall, Jimmy G, he's a guy who had brought this talented San Francisco 49ers offense and this really talented coach in Kyle Shanahan to a Super Bowl and an NFC Championship game. And he lost both of those games in just the final minutes. Jimmy Garoppolo changed 8 minutes of NFL action over the last 3 years. And Jimmy Garoppolo has 2 Super Bowl rings, not one as a backup, but one as a starter in his own team. They restructured his contract this offseason. He now, for every game he plays for the 49ers, he gets $250,000, and each additional win he gets on top, he gets $100,000 per win. So if they win out, he wins the next 14 games. Jimmy G can be looking at $350,000 each game for the next 14 games, which is absolutely insane. Things are working out for Jimmy G. He's already had a segment earlier this offseason. I did not think that the 49ers should move off of Garoppolo. It didn't seem smart. He had too good of a resume. And in this league, with quarterbacks, with how good players are, no guy is a guarantee. And to move off a guy like Jimmy G, who has gotten you to the promised land before, that was a bold move for the 49ers. And they found themselves week 3 already back to Jimmy G. And going on to the next subject today, I want to talk a little bit about the Cincinnati Bengals and their struggles they're facing this season. If you all didn't see, in week 2, they lost to the Dallas Cowboys. This officially begins the Bengals season 0-2. And for me, it boils down to them simply trying to do too much. I only saw the entire game 2 good drives from them against Dallas. It happened in the 4th quarter, and that's when Joe Burrow slowed down with the football. He looked for checkdowns, he looked for slants, he looked for easy curl routes, and he got the ball to his playmakers. That's what Joe Burrow needs to do. I said it last week, what I think is happening with Burrow and this team right now. The entire offseason, all we heard was Joey Burr, he's ice cold. He was hanging out with Jack Harlow and OBJ and LeBron and all these guys that had larger-than-life perspectives. Jack Harlow has a larger-than-life perspective now, and he thinks that he is better than others in the football league, and that he can go out and make these plays, make the big-time throws every single down, which is not possible. We've had these problems before with players like Mahomes, players like Herbert, worried about if they can string together 12, 14, 16 play drives, which it was a question, but now they've proven it. And I think that's the next thing for Joe Burrow to prove this year. He needs to show an entire game where he can put together 12, 14, 16 play drives. Now, going over the defensive side of the ball, the defense, they folded, and as well as the offensive line. These places where the Bengals spent a lot of money this offseason to try and upgrade, they're not getting better. I don't know if the team's not gelling well, if it's chemistry, if it's coaching, but they went out, they spent money, They got offensive linemen. They got 3 new offensive linemen, which was their weak spot, and it is still awful. Burrow was sacked 6 times against the Dallas Cowboys and sacked 7 times in week 1. That's a league-high 13 sacks. He is on track for, I believe, it is 126 sacks this season. If Joe Burrow gets sacked 126 times this season, we're not seeing him play the entire year. It's simple as that. They have to fix the protection issues, and they got to get it together. And I think this weekend is where it starts. They're playing the New York Jets this weekend. It's a great team to get things rolling against, but the Cincinnati Bengals, they cannot let themselves slide again. It has gone too far at this point. It's time for a hard look in the mirror, just like another guy did. The Tua hype, the Miami Dolphins hype, it absolutely has to be real at this point. This past weekend, they staged a comeback win versus the Baltimore Ravens, a double-digit comeback win. Tua threw 6 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill, he caught 2 of them. All this past offseason, we've been getting hyped up. We've been hearing stuff about Tua, how he is going to be a baller this year, how things are going to change. He's the most accurate in the league, blah, blah this, blah, blah that. And this past weekend, it's the first time since Tua got drafted, which I've been a fan ever since he was selected 5th overall a couple years ago. This was the first game where we've been able to see Tua step into the role as a starting quarterback in this league, lead his team while they are down, and come back and get the win. He was a true leader this past weekend. The chemistry, the leadership, the trustworthiness in his receivers, everything from Tua looked great. Tyreek, but also Jalen Waddle, he is a real threat. The Miami Dolphins, they are loaded from top to bottom, and they are not a team that you can sleep on. The team they're playing this weekend, the Buffalo Bills, the Bills look out of this world right now. They're like a Georgia, Alabama, and college football out of this world. Stephon Diggs looks like he's made out of machines and wires and metal and all that. Josh Allen, the same. They both look like robots who are programmed just to play football. The whole entire Bills roster, they have a defense who's going to be the best in the NFL again this year. Their defense last year was by far the best and didn't have a single Pro Bowler get nominated to it. This game this weekend between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills is going to be a complete back and forth war. I think the Bills are going to win it, but with it being in Miami, anything could happen, and this could be another great game for Tua to show that all the trash talk, all the hate, that actually the hype, that was the stuff people should have been listening to and people should have been talking about. People need to trust in him, and I think Tua will only continue to improve throughout the rest of this season. Another team who I think is going to continue to improve is the Broncos. Nathaniel Hackett, it's been being said this past week, is he in over his head? The Broncos, they are now 1-1. They barely won this past week against the Houston Texans, 16-9. And where it boils down here for me is when you have a new quarterback come in, it takes time. And when you have a new head coach come in, it takes some time. And all that, it has to gel together, it has to work. I think stuff will start clicking, but where I get concerned for the Denver Broncos is Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy was one of the most productive receivers all of his years in college, his first year in the NFL. He got hurt last year, but he was one of the most productive receivers and looked to be an all-star in this league. You cannot have Jerry Jeudy not producing or not getting thrown to. Last week, he got 1 fantasy point, 1.2 fantasy points. He is Denver's best receiver. He is worlds better than guys like Courtland Sutton. The Broncos need to be prioritizing using Jerry Jeudy, using their offensive weapons. It's not like they aren't loaded on offense. They are. They have an absolutely great team. Nathaniel Hackett, who's an offensive mastermind, he came from the Packers. I know he knows what he's doing. Nathaniel Hackett, who is an offensive mastermind, is going to get this all worked out, especially with Russell Wilson as quarterback. But these simple mistakes, these 16-9 games over the Houston Texans, those aren't going to work for me. And those are not going to win you any playoff games. If you're paying your quarterback $248 million over the next 5 years, I expect you to let your quarterback go out there and ball. Let Russ cook. All the hype's been building this offseason. You're going to pay a guy all this money. There is no reason not to go out there and let him do his thing. Let him see what he can do. Next game I want to move on to from this past weekend, it was the Packers versus the Bears. It was on Sunday Night Football. This rivalry, it has been absolutely historic, going for over 100 years, over 200 total games. The Packers showed out in Week 2 exactly how I said they were going to. Week 1, every year for them, especially under Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. Every year is a meltdown for the Packers in Week 1. And then Week 2, they bounce back. Things start getting flowing, Receivers, the quarterback, top running backs, offensive linemen, defense, all these top guys, they don't play in the preseason for the Packers. They need a tune-up game. And also, there's something to be said about when a team gets punched in the mouth, if you're a good team, you're going to respond. That's why we saw the Rams win this past weekend by big numbers. And that's why the Packers won by big numbers. When you get punched in the face Week 1, you typically come back, and for the next 6, 7, 8 weeks, that Week 1 loss is still on your mind, and you're still pissed. And just a side note for this, the Vikings, everyone's team to beat the Packers this year, to go on and win the NFC North and do this and do that, and they have the most talented roster. The Vikings, they got annihilated versus the Eagles this past Monday night, and they're already back to midseason form, especially as QB. Kirk Cousins, his primetime record, something that has to be talked about. He's only won 1 to 2 games his entire career in primetime. It has gotten insanely bad at this point, and as an organizational perspective, if I was a GM, Kirk Cousins I would not want him for that very reason. Playoffs is what everybody dreams about. A Super Bowl is what everybody dreams about. Could you imagine the letdown the meltdown Kirk Cousins would have if he led the Minnesota Vikings to a Super Bowl in primetime on Sunday night with 111 million people watching? It'd be a complete meltdown. Kirk Cousins would not be the guy I would want to lead this team, but it's the guy that Minnesota is stuck with, and that's why they're going to stay mediocre yet again this year. In this division, it is the Packers division. I've been saying it for a month. I'm going to continue to say it throughout this whole year. The Packers, they've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa this weekend. I think it's going to be an extremely close game. Tampa is going to most likely be without Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, and Scotty Miller. So their top 4 receivers all have the ability to be out this weekend. If that's the case, I don't see how the Bucs are going to be able to get a lot of offensive production done. They did just sign Cole Beasley, a guy I wish the Packers would have gone out and picked up. They did just sign Cole Beasley, so that could help. Leonard Fournette could help. If any of my viewers are big bettors, definitely be looking for Leonard Fournette rushing attempts, rushing yards, receiving yards this weekend, as Brady is going to have to rely on him heavy. And as we know, Brady favors Fournette. He brought Fournette into Tampa with him. In the Super Bowl, we saw him favor his 3 guys, Gronk, Fournette, and AB. When Tom Brady brings a guy to a place like Tampa, Tom Brady is going to feed that guy and make sure he succeeds. It's going to be a close game. Tampa, I believe they're favored by 1.5 at this point, mainly due to it being in Tampa. Rodgers historically never plays good in Florida, so I think Tampa will end up winning this ball game, but it's a game I would not touch betting-wise, would not touch spread-wise, anything. We don't know what is going to happen here. We don't know how the Packers' defense is going to play, how Aaron Rodgers is going to play. Could be a shootout. It could be a blowout. I would stay away from it. Either team could win it here. Now, the last team I want to talk about I got two teams left I want to talk about before we get into our picks for the week. The Indianapolis Colts and their struggles so far this season. They're like the Cincinnati Bengals, starting 0-2, except only it's worse than Cincinnati. The Indianapolis Colts, they have played the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars this season and have only scored 20 points so far. The whole year. 5 teams have scored 20 or more in a quarter already this season. And the Colts have only scored 20 the entire season. Not to mention, if we go back to last year, all the teams that started 0-2 last year did not make the playoffs. So teams like Indianapolis, teams like Oakland, teams like Cincinnati, who were close or made the playoffs last year, they are not looking great so far. But the Indianapolis Colts, back to their struggles, they, in my opinion, can no longer blame Carson Wentz like this entire offseason Jim Irsay loved to do. Jim Irsay, he went on show after show after show saying last year they had the roster, they had the run game, they had the defense, but their sole issue was Carson Wentz. All they've done this offseason, they went out and they moved to a more experienced, older quarterback, knew what he was doing, and they've begun the season 0-2 looking significantly worse. They underperformed against the Jaguars and the Texans. That's the 2 worst teams they're going to play the entire year. 4 years post Andrew Luck. 4 years since Andrew Luck retired. 4 years in the NFL, we know it is a lifetime. In the NBA, it could take 7 to 8 years to completely transform and revitalize a franchise. You can change a franchise in 1 to 2 off seasons in the NFL. And in 4 years, the Colts, they've gone out, they've gotten multiple quarterbacks, they've gotten multiple coaches, they've had time to rebuild and get the right everything. Indy is also a big market for big players. Guys like playing in Indianapolis. They have the offensive weapons. They have the defensive weapons. Their run game could be top 3. Their defense could be top 3. And we know that is a recipe for a Super Bowl. But for the Colts, it's a recipe for a disaster. It can no longer be blamed on Carson Wentz. I don't know what the issue is, if I'm being honest with you all. But I know there is one. And I think it could start all the way up at Jim Irsay's level. The last few years, he's been a little cranky. He's been a little Jerry Jones-esque, if that makes sense. He's been a little too hands-on with the team. Jim Irsay, I've liked him as an owner in the past. I especially liked him in the Peyton days and things like that, in the Pat McAfee days. But he's getting older. He's getting more hostile. And saying stuff like coming out against former players and praising your upcoming team this year and saying they will do better, it's not helping this current team. And they have now started 0-2. And some people need to take a look in the mirror, or else this road, and they are just going to keep going further and further down the losing road. The last team I want to talk about, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last night on Thursday Night Football, they had a big loss to the Cleveland Browns, an in-division loss in the AFC North loss, and it is due to one reason and one reason only, in my opinion, and that is their quarterback's Mitchell Trubisky's extremely low ceiling. Mitchell Trubisky, he went 20 for 32, 207 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. While it isn't a bad stat line, it is not a stat line I want out of a starting quarterback in this league. 3rd week in a row I'm harping on it. I'm going to stay on it. It is Kenny Pickett's time. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they have an extremely talented roster. They have a head coach who knows what he is doing. Their quarterback is purely not good enough and has too low of a ceiling. Kenny Pickett, he could be one of the most comfortable rookie quarterbacks we have ever seen. Guys like Kyler Murray, guys like Justin Herbert, guys like Patrick Mahomes, they had 1 year in college of starts. Kenny Pickett had 3 years of starts. He didn't have to move stadiums. He got drafted to Pittsburgh and he played for Pittsburgh. He knows everything about this team. He knows more than a rookie should ever know. What Mitch is doing is simply not good enough. You have George Pickens being a beast, catching one-handed balls, this and that. This division is only going to continue to get harder. You've got the Cleveland Browns winning games with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Just imagine when Deshaun Watson steps in there week 13. The AFC North is completely up in the air. In this upcoming draft class, you've got 5 to 6 quarterbacks who can be taken in the first round. With that in mind, the Pittsburgh Steelers need to figure out what they have in Kenny Pickett. You know what you have in Mitchell Trubisky. You've got an 8-8, 8-9 quarterback. You've got a 500 guy. Plain as that. With the AFC North completely up in the air, Baltimore lost this past weekend, Cincinnati lost, Pittsburgh obviously lost, and Cleveland is only sitting with 1 or 2 wins. The AFC North is completely up in the air. Pittsburgh has a win. They need to make this change to Kenny Pickett now to give themselves a chance the rest of this year to fight with the AFC North, because Mitchell Trubisky is not going to get the job done. Last thing before we get out of here today, I want to bring you guys my best bets for the weekend. I've got 2 money lines and 4 spreads for you all. My first money line, it's going to be the Chiefs over the Colts. Like I said earlier, the Colts, they do not look like what we expected them to be. Jim Irsay has been trashing them the entire season. Their own owner, he was trashing their last quarterback, saying they did not live up to it. That got in their heads, and the Chiefs are going to come in, and they're going to steamroll them again. That's also one of my spreads for the week. Chiefs minus 6.5. They're going to beat them by more than a touchdown. Colts are going to fall to 0-3. And pretty much all their playoff hope is lost. The next money line I got for you all, it's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers over the Jacksonville Jaguars. While I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are getting better, I just think the Chargers are too good of a roster. Earlier this week, we saw on Sunday, Justin Herbert, he got injured. He ended up coming back into the game and was an absolute dog. Threw some darts. He wasn't able to get the job done, however. It is being said that Justin Herbert is going to play this weekend, but even if he doesn't, I love the Chargers backup quarterback, Chase Daniels. He's an experienced guy in this league who knows what he's doing. He backed up Patrick Mahomes the last couple years, won some games, got a 4th down conversion for him. He is a veteran, knows what he's doing. If he's got to play this game, I think even Chase Daniels beats the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. The next spread I've got for you all, it's going to be Lions at the Vikings. Vikings are favored by 7, and I've got to take Lions plus 7. Lions are a team that consistently is getting better. They were on Hard Knocks again this past offseason and really seem inspired. They put up a good fight against the Eagles as well in their 1 loss so far this season. The Vikings, they fell apart this past week on primetime. Part of the reason due to Kirk, part of the reason just due to their offense as a whole. And I think the Lions are going to be able to keep this inside 1 touchdown. Not saying they're going to win, but I am saying the Lions will cover. Rams at Cardinals. The Cardinals, last week, I thought they were going to fall to 0-2. They started the season 0-1, lost to the Chiefs big. And like I was saying all offseason, I thought the Cardinals were just too damn noisy. But they seem to be coming back a little bit. They're teeter-totter. And with the Rams, I said it all offseason. They're my Super Bowl pick. They still are to this day. Simply too good of a roster. They know what they're doing. Sean McVay is a mastermind like we haven't seen. I've got a hammer Rams minus 3 here. And the last line I am rolling with, I'm rocking Geno Smith. It's Geno time. The Atlanta Falcons are at the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are favored by 2. And I think Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Pete Carroll, they are going to cover those 2 points. Seahawks minus 2, lock it in. So to run it back through, Chiefs over Colts, Chargers over Jaguars, Chiefs minus 6.5, Lions +7, Rams -3, and Seahawks -2. That's all I've got for you all today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another edition of the Adam Eisen Show. As we move into the weekend, don't forget to watch plenty of college football and NFL. Have yourselves a great weekend. I will be back in a week's time to talk to you all again. Until then, peace.